The fundamental thing that distinguishes Yellowstone from other national parks is the variety of hydrothermal features it contains. Hot springs are pools of heated water that do not erupt. Geysers look like hot springs most of the time, but they occasionally erupt by spurting water anywhere from a few inches high to 300 feet high. Fumaroles involve heated water underground, but are seen above ground as vents of steam. Many of these features are found along the Firehole River. You can check out our overview video of the area, but this video will go into detail on the features found in one part of the Upper Geyser Basin, the area around Old Faithful and Geyser Hill. Old Faithful is located on the south side of the Firehole River, and Geyser Hill sits on the north. This area also includes Observation Point, Solitary Geyser, and Three Sisters Spring, which we saw in the overview video for the Firehole River Geyser Basins. Within view of Old Faithful is one of the park's main visitor centers. First, we'll zoom into this area to look at what you can find there. The various visitor centers in the park focus on different topics. The focus at the Old Faithful Visitor Education Center is on the park's hydrothermal features. The exhibits here describe how these features work and the microorganisms that live in the scalding hot waters they produce. One of the most important biological discoveries of recent history came from Yellowstone when the bacterium Thermus aquaticus was discovered in a hot spring in the lower geyser basin. We'll save the discussion of it for a later video, but the Visitor Center at Old Faithful will give you an introduction. There are also exhibits describing other things to look for in the hot water. The Visitor Center is flanked by the Old Faithful Lodge and Cabins, and the Old Faithful Inn. The Old Faithful Inn is one of the largest log buildings in the world, with a huge lobby where you can stand and see 8 stories up. Even if you're not staying as a hotel guest, drop in for coffee or a meal. It is one of the non-biological experiences you shouldn't miss. But enough about the buildings. The star of the area is, of course, Old Faithful. The famous geyser is located just behind the visitor center. Its eruptions happen every 90 minutes on average, give or take 10 minutes or so. If you get to the viewing area 10 minutes before the predicted eruption, you'll likely be joined by many others, but they won't impede your view. It is neither the most regular nor the tallest geyser in the park, but its combination of the two provide an almost guaranteed chance that you'll see a spectacular geyser on your time schedule. While waiting for the eruption, you'll see steam rising from its vent, and you may see a few teases before the full eruption. You'll know when it happens and you won't be disappointed. There we go. Full eruptions usually last from 2 to 5 minutes, but we'll save that for later on in this video. For now, let's check out the rest of the area. On the same side of the Firehole River as Old Faithful, there are 2 other features, Blue Star Spring and Chinese Spring. Blue Star Spring, as its name suggests, is a spring, not a geyser. Chinese Spring's name is deceiving, however, since it does have some geyser activity. While you're at this spot, you can look across the Firehole River toward Geyser Hill and see the water running off from Cascade Geyser, decorated by some of the microorganisms that can live in the constant supply of hot water. And that's about it for this side of the river. Crossing the bridge over the river brings you to Geyser Hill. Just after crossing the bridge, you may want to hike up to Observation Point. From there, you can take in the developed area around Old Faithful and all of Geyser Hill. Before you get to the boardwalk loop, you can look across the river and see the runoff coming from Blue Star Spring. Like at Cascade Geyser, the runoff provides just the right temperature for microbial communities to thrive. The runoff is not as hot as the water in the spring itself, but is much warmer than the Firehole River it flows into. Once you start going clockwise around the boardwalk loop, the first thing you'll see is an unassuming feature named Sulphide Spring. Hydrogen sulfide is the smell most people relate to rotten eggs. You can get whiffs of this smell at various features across the park. Next comes Bronze Spring, another feature with little to no geyser activity. The next two features, Silver Spring and Little Squirt Geyser, are a little ways from the boardwalk. When Little Squirt is active, it looks just like its name suggests. You might also try to see Cascade Geyser from this vantage point. From here, this feature is too far away to see, and from the other side of the river, this feature was too high to see. But it's there, as evidenced by the runoff that provides habitat for the microorganisms. After struggling to see Silver Spring, Little Squirt, and Cascade Geysers, the next stop is a sure thing, the Anemone Geysers. Anemone is a pair of geysers that sometimes seem independent and sometimes seem to be synced up. Big Anemone usually erupts every 7 to 10 minutes, so it won't be long before this happens. The eruption comes to a sudden stop, and as fast as the water comes up, it drains even faster back down the hole. On our visit, it only took a minute before Little Anemone did the same thing, only its eruption was not as big and it drained slower. While waiting for an eruption from Anemone, you may see some activity from Improbable Geyser. From Anemone, the boardwalk takes you to Plume Geyser. Born in just 1922 from a steam explosion, Plume has gone through periods of little to no activity since then. Continuing from Plume Geyser, you will start to walk over the multicolored runoff channels where you can get a good look at the mats of bacteria and other microbes that thrive in the hot water. Unlike the runoff from Cascade Geyser and Blue Star Spring, which you could only see from a distance, here you can see a wide variety of amazing detail. The color can indicate both the temperature of the water and the types of microbes living there. These microbes live in conditions that animals, like us, can't provide within our bodies, so they are no threat to us whatsoever. Surrounded by these bacterial mats is Beehive Geyser. Beehive is a good example of a cone-type geyser and is one of the tallest regularly active geysers in Yellowstone. From this view, you can also see Old Faithful steaming in the distance. Beehive, while regular, is unfortunately not predictable. It has eruptions every few days to weeks, but the chances of seeing an eruption are slim. Both Beehive and Old Faithful show activity that makes it seem like they're starting to erupt when they aren't. Thanks to James St. John, we can at least show you what a beehive eruption looks like on its own. Impressive, right? At least as impressive as Old Faithful. The difference between Beehive and Old Faithful is that Old Faithful, as its name suggests, will likely erupt near the predicted time. Armed with this predicted time, which you can get at the Visitor Center or on the Yellowstone Geyser app, you will be able to see it from most parts of Geyser Hill. Now, sit back and enjoy this full eruption of Old Faithful. It's about 1.5 minutes long. After Beehive, the trail leads to Geyser Spring. I'm assuming this feature got its name because of the way the runoff from each spring interacted, but I'm not sure. The next feature is Depression Geyser. Depression Geyser erupts every 5 to 9 hours with spurts up to 10 feet high. But often the spurts don't surpass a couple of feet. As you continue walking, you'll cross over the runoff from Dragon Spring. Here you can see more bacterial mats up close. Dragon Spring itself is like Cascade Geyser, too far away from the boardwalk to really see from any location. Next comes Arrowhead Spring. From the boardwalk, it will look like a hole in the ground with no activity. Heart Spring also has no activity, but at least you can kind of see that it's shaped like a heart. After Heart Spring is the Lion Group. The Lion Group is made up of 4 geysers. Little Cub, Lioness, Big Cub, and Lion geysers. Little Cub sputters along at times like you'd think a geyser with its name would. Lion Geyser, when it erupts, also lives up to its name in comparison to Little Cub. From the Lion Group, we move on to the Goggles Group. To me, when I look at Goggles Spring, it reminds me a little bit of swimming goggles. North Goggles Geyser doesn't remind me of any kind of goggles, but it can be more active. Continuing from here, you come to a fork in the path that could lead you to Morning Glory Pool Trail. 2 features of note from here are Castle Geyser and Liberty Pool. Castle Geyser can be seen in the distance here from Geyser Hill. You'll be able to see it up close when you take the Morning Glory Trail. Liberty Pool is kind of a loner feature, which can only be seen on this trail that connects Geyser Hill to Morning Glory Trail. But we're going to continue around the boardwalk on Geyser Hill. This brings us to Ear Spring. Generally a calmly bubbling feature, it has erupted in the past. Notice the area around the spring in this footage from 2017. No big rocks or debris. But a year later, Ear Spring erupted for the first time in many years, as captured in this video by the Geyser Observation and Study Association from the Visitor Center. The eruption blasted out rocks and trash that had accumulated over the years. Everything from a bear warning sign to a pacifier to beer cans to coins came out. Items like these have caused other geysers in the park to change their behavior and even to cool down and change colors from being choked by debris. Please don't throw anything into the hydrothermal features. Moving on, we come to Pendant Spring. This feature, which looks like a pendant dangling from its runoff channel chain, is an example of a feature that doesn't erupt. Next we come to another optional detour up the hill to Solitary Geyser. If you hike up to see this feature, you could traverse across to Observation Point or return back down to the Geyser Hill Loop. We'll return to the loop and visit Beach Spring next. This feature doesn't look much like a beach, but it sounds just like waves would as they crash on a beach. Aurum Geyser is next. Aurum is the Latin word for gold, and you can kind of see why that name applies here. The next feature is one of the largest on Geyser Hill that you can actually see fairly well, Doublet Pool. These two pools, connected by a thin, shallow channel, have some beautiful, intricate edges and vivid colors. Sponge Geyser comes at the big bend in the boardwalk loop. The flanks of this shallow cone-type geyser look spongy enough that you could squish into them, but you can't. From this vantage point, you can also attempt to see Dragon Spring, but it is still too far away. Rounding the corner brings us to Pump Geyser. This is a small but generally active feature. Teakettle Spring is next, with some similarities to Sponge Geyser in outward appearance. Next comes Vault and Giantess geysers. Giantess is a large feature but is difficult to really see from the boardwalk. Apparently it does erupt occasionally and can be quite impressive. Vault Geyser is in the foreground of Giantess and is easier to see. Infant Geyser is an adorable little thing which probably got its name because it is so close to the boardwalk. Many similar features in the park have no names at all. Mottled Pool is another feature which is hard to see, but the ground surrounding it is colorful. The last feature on Geyser Hill is Dome Geyser. It's not hard to see the dome, but it's pretty much impossible to see the geyser on top of it unless it's erupting. Even if it is erupting, it doesn't stand out much. And that ends the tour of Geyser Hill. There are many more features in the Upper Geyser Basin, and we'll explore them in the next 3 videos. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to be notified when they come out.